The Little Match Girl. It was bitterly cold, snow was falling, and the evening darkness was setting in. It was the last night of the year, New Year's Eve. In this cold, in this darkness, a little girl walked bareheaded and barefoot in the street. Actually, she had slippers on when she left home, but they were of no use. They were too big for her. They were her mother's old slippers. They were so big that when the little girl crossed the street, two fast-moving carriages came towards her, and in her haste, the slippers slipped off her feet and were lost. She couldn't find one, and the other was taken by a boy who ran away, saying that if he ever had a child, he would use the slipper instead of a cradle. That's why the poor girl was walking in the street, her feet bare, freezing in the cold. She had many matches in her old apron, and she held some of them in her hand. Throughout the day, no one had bought a single match, no one had given her a penny. The poor little girl walked in the snow, hungry and frozen. She looked weary and frightened. The long golden hair that cascaded in curls down her back was covered in thick flakes of snow, but she had no thought for her beauty. All the windows were lit, and the streets were filled with the delicious smell of roast goose. Indeed, it's New Year's Eve tonight, she thought. She huddled up in a corner between two houses, where one slightly projected over the other into the street. She had gathered her little feet under her, but she was still getting colder and colder. Nonetheless, she dared not go home because she had not sold a single match, nor earned a penny. Therefore, she was certain to get a beating from her father, and besides, the house was as cold as it was outside. Their home was merely under a roof, and despite stuffing the large holes with straw and rags, a cutting wind still blew inside. Oh, how good a single match would be now. If she could only take one from the box and strike it against the wall to warm her fingers. Finally, she couldn't resist any longer. She took a match. She struck it against the wall, and the match lit up. It burned so beautifully. When she cupped it in her hands, it burned with a warm, bright flame like a tiny candle. It was a strange light. It made the little girl feel as though she were sitting in front of a large iron stove with brass ornaments. The stove was burning brightly, warming her wonderfully. The little girl stretched out her feet. She wanted to warm them too. At that moment, the flame went out, and the stove vanished suddenly. The poor girl was left with a burnt matchstick in her hand. She struck another match. It flared up, and when its light hit the wall, it became transparent like a veil. Now the little girl could see inside the room. Inside, a beautifully white tablecloth was spread on the table. Delicate porcelain dishes were placed on it, and the steam rose from the roast goose filled with plums and apples. And then something even more surprising, more wonderful happened. The goose jumped off the dish with the knife and fork stuck in its back and walked briskly towards where the poor girl was sitting. At that moment, the match went out, and the thick, cold wall reappeared. The little girl struck another match. Now she was sitting under a magnificent Christmas tree. It was much larger and more decorated than the one she had seen last Christmas in the rich merchant's house through the glass door. The tree's green branches were lit with hundreds of candles and colorful objects, resembling those displayed in the shop windows, looked down on her from above. The little girl raised her hands in the air, and at that moment the match went out. A multitude of Christmas candles rose into the sky, and the little girl saw them turn into stars. Then one of the stars fell, leaving a long streak of light in the sky. "Someone is dying now," said the little girl, because her kind grandmother, who had died a long time ago, had said, "When a star falls, it means that the soul of someone who is dying is rising to the sky." The little match girl struck another match. As soon as it lit up, the surroundings brightened, and within this brightness, her grandmother appeared with a radiant, lovely face. "Grandmother," called the little girl, "take me with you. I know that as soon as the match goes out, you will disappear, just like the warm stove, the beautiful roast goose, and the beautiful decorated Christmas tree disappeared." Then, in a panic, she lit all the matches she had left, one after another. She didn't want to leave her grandmother. The matches burned so brightly that everything was illuminated as if it were daytime. The grandmother had never looked so big, so beautiful in her eyes. The little girl was taken into her arms, and the two of them ascended together in a brilliant light, happy into the sky. Now the cold, hunger, and fear were far from the little girl. She was in a completely different life now. Early in the morning, those passing by saw the little girl sitting in a corner of a house. With her cheeks red and a smile on her lips, she had frozen to death on the last night of the year. On the first morning of the new year, the sun rose over her small body. Almost all that was left was a bundle of burnt matches. She wanted to get warm, everyone said. But no one knew what beautiful things she had seen, what dreams she had seen in the flame of the matches.